and welcome to Dream It, Dare It, Do It, Live the Life You Want. I'm Jasmine, your host, and I have my good friend Judith Johnson with me today. Hi, Judith.
Hello,
Judith
hello.
and I, we met because somebody said, Judith, call Jasmine. and then we got to work together.
And I'm obedient, and so I called.
And it was, and I, for those of you listening, Judith is a writer, and amongst other things, but the reason why I wanted her to come today is because we have something in common. Yes, this is the book, Making Peace with Death and Dying. So the reason, for those of you listening on audio, she's showing the cover of the page of the book. Okay, so the reason why I wanted you on is because you and I have something in common, and that thing is that we both took care of our moms. And I think that, I don't know about you, but I know I grew quite a bit taking care of mom. How about you?
It was, I would say that it was one of the most profound, it was the most profound experience of my life. And it was the hardest job in the world and the greatest blessing at the same time.
I totally agree. I totally agree. I kind of jumped over the intro, but because I know you, I'm like, okay, well, let's get into it. But for the people who don't know you, Judith, do you want to just share a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Okay. So, sure. So in my own personal life, I've had some bits of a rocky road along the way, and it led me to really being kind of obsessed with understanding human consciousness, because it became very clear to me, for example, when I would have trouble in a relationship with somebody else, that the problem that I was experiencing was inside of me. It wasn't because of them. They were just triggering things. So I've become like big on understanding human consciousness. And I do a lot of counseling and mentoring work with people right now, using that work in helping people to get free and raise the level of consciousness from which they live their lives. And I do that with individuals, I do it with couples, and I also help people around end-of-life issues. And a lot of that revolves around this book. And the book is the outgrowth of, this is my third book. My first two books have to do with the wedding ceremony. You can look them up on Amazon. The Wedding Ceremony Planner, The Essential Guide to the Most Important Part of Your Wedding Day, and How to Write Meaningful Wedding Vows. So anyway, my mother and I shared a home the last 9 years of her life. And on her deathbed, she grabbed my wrist and made me promise that I would write about what we learned about aging and dying in a culture that is ill at ease with that part of life. And so that's what this book is about. It took me 15 years to write it and get it out there into the world. So I feel really good to have it out. It came out in March. But what Jasmine was referring to is that we both had the shared experience of being there with our mothers as primary caregivers for the end periods of their lives. And in my case, it was her last 9 years.
Yeah. I mean, it was difficult like you said, it was a difficult time to take care of mom. And mom didn't want to talk about death. Mom was literally afraid of death. I mean, I remember growing up, for the animals, because we're animal lovers. So I remember the animals, it was a big thing. Like she would really get frantic around death. She didn't like to go to funerals. So in my family, we didn't really talk about it. We just didn't talk about that kind of thing. And honestly, I thought that, I wouldn't be able to be around it, and, before I took care of my mom, I took care of my dog. I took care of a dog. He was 14 and a half when he left. And I remember, I think I think he was 8 and people started telling me I should put him down. And I was like, what do you like? He still had like nearly 7 years to go, but I took care of him, and I was with him. It was the first pet that I'd been with him on the day of his death. And I stayed with him when I had him put down, because it was just like time. I knew it was time. And it was the very first time that I saw that what I was in love with was the energy of the dog. It wasn't the dog.
Mhm.
And I think that helped me so much in dealing with my mom. Like, people might get upset that I'm comparing dogs with my mom, but my animals are like very important to me, and my mom was very important to me. And I think that I learned from my dog, and she was taking care of the dog.
Yeah.
And when my dog passed, we saw a decline in her. And so we got this dog, and she started taking care of her. But it's still, the decline was like, it was kind of like done.
Yeah.
And when she first started having a hard time with, when she first started saying the wrong words, like she would say things like, oh, such a beautiful cat, my father would get super upset, and he'd be like, it's not a cat, it's a dog, it's a dog. And he would give her crap, and then she'd get all flustered and she'd just clam up, right? And I learned to just let her be her.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that was important to me to include in my book is a list of what is normal about in aging and, end of life. And just because of exactly what you're describing is, we think something's wrong. It's like, what's wrong with you? Why don't you know that that's a dog and not a cat? Well, it is normal for us to have memory lapse. There's all kinds of things that are perfectly normal. But because we live like this in relationship to death, we have no idea what's normal. And our fear takes over. And when you said earlier that we didn't talk about death in our family, neither did we. Nobody does. That's one of the problems, is that we act as, we go like this towards death. I mean, it's like, can you imagine if you were you knew you were going to go on a big trip? Can you imagine not packing a suitcase, getting your passport, getting ready to go? And yet we all know we're going to die, but we do nothing to prepare. It's very interesting when you think about it. Yeah. And let me just say this, the reason we don't prepare is we've been taught not to, because we live in societies that fear death. Not all societies do. Yeah.
Well, when we first started working together, I saw the power of your book. I really did. I get it. I was like, yay, Judith, right? And then you said that you were going to do a workshop, and we did the workshop together, right? So everybody listening, if you guys want to have a workshop, Judith is there. She can do that for you. And but I was really surprised at how many people actually showed up for the workshop.
Yeah.
Like, I was like amazed what surprised me was that the people that were showing up were people that were facing the death of a loved one.
Mm-hmm.
And they just wanted to be able to talk about it.
Exactly. And in fact, I was so pleased with that, because the host of the workshop, I asked, how many people do you expect? And she said, oh, if we get 15 to 20, that'll be a good crowd. We got 81,
yeah.
And I was so gratified by that. Yeah. And in terms of talking about it, I do want to mention to anyone who's listening that if you've never been to a death cafe, I know this is probably the oddest thing in the world if you've never heard of it, but if you go to deathcafe.com, they have them all over the world. And it started out, I think in 2012 or something, but they're everywhere. And they caught on like wildfire because this is a place where you go. I mean, they're scheduled in different communities, and people just sit with total strangers. And they have some organization to how the thing it flows. But you talk about death, and people talk about, my husband has stage 4 cancer, or my cat died last week, or I don't have a will because I'm afraid to write it. And people will tell these things to total strangers, but we don't talk to our families about it. Yeah. It's kind of odd, isn't it?
It is very odd.
So the Death Cafe is a great way to break the ice for yourself. Drag your family along.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's really important to just, and like, I'm looking at my aunts right now. I've got older aunts, and I'm talking to them, and I'm telling them, like, what do you want? What if all of a sudden you can't do anything, like, what do you want? Tell your kids. You have to tell your kids.
Yeah.
I knew my mom didn't want to go into a home, but I couldn't take care of her anymore. It was just not feasible. Like she was now, at one point she was rubbing herself on walls. She was like just walking on walls. And I was like, what are you doing, Mom? And I'm like, she was just like, wait a second. And that was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Right? But I kind of saw it was just like, okay, I can't do it anymore right now, So, but I think that it's important for everybody to just talk and get real with yourself.
Yeah. And each other. And the talking part, know that you live in a world where people don't know how to talk about this. So for you to be the one who takes the lead is a really loving, kind gesture for you to take with friends and family. And I just want to mention that there's really 3 things that we need to take care of ahead of time. And if we don't think about it and thoughtfully prepare ahead of time, we put a great burden on our loved ones, because then they don't know what we want. And also to know that about 1 in 3 of us die before we're 65. You don't have to be old to die. People die when they're 28, when they're 4. Look at school shootings, all of these things. People die. And one of the greatest gifts you can get is to let your loved ones know, here's what I want to happen to me when the time comes. And those 3 things are your end of life medical care. So for example, your mom didn't want to go into a nursing home. And so you did everything you could to honor that. Okay. That was important to know. What if you didn't know that? Yeah. Like I know people who say, I do want to go in a nursing home. I don't want my loved ones to take me into the house. Okay. But each of us has that secret inside of us. Tell people what you want. Okay. And I don't know in Canada, but in the States, we have what is called a healthcare proxy, which is a legal document where you appoint a person to speak on your behalf if you're unable to speak for yourself about medical care. And this is important, even if you're like a young person and you're having surgery. If you're unconscious, you can't make a decision. So if a decision needs to be made, you need some human being who you've given the authority to speak on your behalf about what you would want. Okay, that's super important. Second area is what to do with my stuff. My stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like that print right up there behind me. That's a treasure of mine, and I want to make sure that of where it goes and things like that. It doesn't have to be something of great financial value.
Your pets.
And our pets. It's like, think through, okay, if I were to die next week, what is it I would like to have happen to all this stuff? So that is a great gift to, even if you have written it down and haven't even legally processed it into a will or an estate yet, at least document, including a roadmap into your computer.
Yeah.
What accounts do you have there? Things like
Yeah.
that. And the third one quickly is what to do with your body. Okay. So for example, I have signed a contract with, there's a triage process that happens with dead bodies that are donated to the nearest medical training hospital in one's area. And in my case, it's Albany, New York. So I have a contract so that if I die, my body goes to them for research. Okay. Because in my personal beliefs, if I'm out of my body, if I'm gone,
Yeah.
This does not have value to me once I'm dead. For some people, they want, mausoleums built and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Everybody's different. Some people want, hundreds of people to come and cry and the loss of their, their death. For me, I couldn't care less. I really don't care. And, you might think, well, why don't you care? Well, that's my business. You know what I'm saying? But the point is, you have to tell people.
Yeah.
You have to tell people that. And I learned, for example, that it matters to my brother to have a ritual after I die. So I'm making arrangements for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was important for my mom too, to have a ritual. So I did that for her. I knew that she wanted her. And I knew that my aunts and uncle wanted it also. So I think that I'm very happy with, how it all developed. But I think that how I did that was because I spent so much time with her, and I did ask her questions,
Right.
like I did ask her the things. So,
and I want to go back to something else you said, and it was when you were referring to Butte, your lovely dog behind you, and also about your mom. And there was a comment you made. I can't remember exactly how you said it, but it's kind of like, I don't know how I did that because I was really scared. I know that when I took on care of my mother, I was clueless what I was dealing with, especially the last 6 months. And it was really scary. But what drove the adrenaline in me was how much I loved her. In my case, I was really lucky because this was somebody I really loved. It's a lot harder when it's somebody you have a tough relationship with. And that's another reality. Okay.
yeah.
And it's a balancing act about what you can do. It's like when you reach the point where you knew your mom didn't want to go in a nursing home, but that you couldn't handle it yourself. There is a balancing act about yes, you're trying to do the best for her, but your job first is to be yourself.
Yeah.
It's tricky business. It's not always an easy journey.
No. Yeah. I agree. It was the most difficult times. It was the most difficult times of my life, but it was also the most beautiful, like the most enriching time. And I had a lot of fun. Like we would, my mom was so simple. My mom was a simple lady. I was like, Mom, do you want to go have ice cream? She'd be like, let's go. And, we'd get in the car, I'd get her an ice cream, and then I'd just drive with the music up.
Yeah.
And she'd be like tapping her foot. She was singing every single words of these songs. I had her playlist, and we had beautiful time. Like I'm telling you, and I got the chills,
Yeah.
And, and wherever she'd go, she'd be like, ask my daughter, where's my daughter? She was just the cutest.
Yeah.
And I would bring her to work. I was such a lucky person.
Yeah.
Because I was able to bring her to work with me.
Wow.
Yeah,
I remember, towards the end when my mother was more sedentary, she would get gastric distress. Okay. And she'd be rubbing her abdomen. My mother was an RN, so she knew all the anatomy stuff and she knew where to rub and all of this stuff. But sometimes it would be days or, and posturing in different ways, trying to move gas or something that was in there. And I'll tell you, when it would finally move, my mother would get one of those grins on her face. And I mean, this was a very refined woman. And she would just let the gas rip. And she would burp like a like a 400-pound truck driver from her toes all the way up with this grin on her face as it released, you know? So there are moments like that that can be hysterically funny and intimate. And it's, to me, it's such an opportunity to just demonstrate your love for another human being, because so many people live lives that are so busy that we don't have time for each other. And when you really set aside and give priority to caring for a loved one who's dying, you know, it's a time warp, and it's kind of just the two of you. And it's a beautiful thing to do. I can't explain it. I mean, it's awful and it's wonderful at the same time.
Yeah, I agree. And then what would you do? Like, because she lived with you for 9 years, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
she just lived with me for 6 months. The last 6 months of her life, she lived with me. So 9 years, that's a long time. And what would you do for you time?
For me time,
Yeah.
that was the thing that was hardest for me, because I fell into the trap that most caregivers fall into. And I'm glad you brought this up, because anybody who we can help by saying this, I'm going to be really happy about, is you have to take care of yourself. You have to keep in mind that thing about that they say on the airplanes, that you put on, you know, your mask first before the child's. You take care of yourself before you take care of others. And I didn't do that well, because I fell into what a lot of caregivers do, which is, well, her need is more urgent than mine. And I kept putting myself in the back burner, and I burnt out. It was really, really hard. It was rough on me. But you do have to take care of yourself, and you have to really pay attention. Like, there were times when I would see myself getting really nasty and short-tempered with her. Though that's a sign that I needed time out, you know, and I wasn't taking it.
Yeah.
It was easier when she was in the hospital and I would go home at night.
Yeah.
Then I would get time alone.
Yeah, because the snapping or that, it has nothing to do with them. It has to do with you, right? It's really like we have this misunderstanding that if we're getting short-tempered, it's because of the other person. It's not because of the other person. Yeah.
And you have to really, when you take care of yourself, you give of your overflow instead of depleting yourself. And it's to become aware of that you're going to have that challenge if you're in a caregiving role. And you are not being selfish to take care of yourself. You serve better and from a higher state of consciousness if you take care of yourself.
Yeah, it's like I'm happy because I was already at a higher state of consciousness. And so therefore I called the city and I called the social worker, and I was lucky. At one point I had help 5 days a week.
Yeah.
You know, and they would come in. I had this lady that would come in, and she was there. I had one lady that came 3 days a week, and I had one other lady that would come 2 days a week, and she loved them, you know, in the beginning. And you know, I'm going to tell you the story. So this girl would come, and she was a young girl. I mean, I love people. So anybody who's listening here that's taking care of the elderly, I love you. I really do. This young girl, I'm telling you, she must have been 25, 26. She would come in and she would color with her. She would make her color. She would make her play games. And at one point she said to me, she says, "Can I go out with her?" And I said, "Sure, you can go out with her. Mom, would you go out with her?" She's like, "Yeah." She's like, "Give me my coat." I'm like, "I'm leaving." And what she did is she brought her to a ceramics cafe. And it was near Christmas. My mom passed away on February 13th. I sold my house in December 26th. So we didn't celebrate because I was like basically packing. I had to move on December 26th. So we were basically all of December I was packing. So I was packing and taking care of mom. And on the 26th, we moved. Anyways, I couldn't take care of her, burnt out. Mom went to a home and that was it, right? And when she passed away, I said, I said to everybody, because these girls were coming and I said, sorry, she's passed away. And they were like, oh man, I can't believe that. And she showed up at the funeral home. She came, she brought me a plate.
Oh,
And she said, Jasmine, this was your Christmas gift. I wasn't sure if I should bring it to you, but your mother did this. And she showed me the plate and I have it. It's hung in my wall in the living room.
oh, how beautiful.
And she says, she told me, she chose the colors. So she chose, it's a nice green and purple. And she showed it to me and she said, in the back, it's written to my daughter, Jasmine. And
Yeah.
she said, she told me to write this. So
Yeah.
so I have this beautiful, I was bawling, I'm telling you, and I get choked up,
Yeah.
So, but before she left, she did that. She played.
Yeah.
She was 79. She was still young. Now, now I'm like, oh man, that's young,
Yeah.
but it was a gorgeous, gorgeous gift.
And in listening to you say that, it just reaffirms again how important it is for us to love each other. And that if I want to just say that for anyone who has a difficult relationship with an elderly parent or somebody, see if you can't let go of the anger and the resentment and the judgment of who they are. And, maybe touch into that person's doing the best they can.
Yeah.
And they served me by bringing me into this world, and I'll just let that be their contribution to me or whatever. But if really to release ourselves as much as we can from any grudges and judgments, to release and forgive as much as we can before anybody goes. It's a gift to ourselves, because otherwise, once they're gone, it's a lot harder to do when they're already gone.
Yeah.
And things like your mother's plate, I mean, $1 million, you wouldn't sell that for $1 million. It's like that plate was your mother's love incarnate. There it is. It's so sweet, so sweet.
Yeah. It is. It definitely is. It's like, guys, don't hold grudges. That's just old stuff that you're ruminating, like you're chewing on. Just let it go. That moment has passed.
And and the other thing is that what is left when we get rid of that is love.
Yeah.
So it's like when you don't have a loving relationship with someone, it's because you're having a relationship on of something else, which is maybe judgment and rejection and all of that. But if you remove the judgment and rejection, you have the opportunity to have a friendship and kindness. And it's up to us. It's up to us to do that.
Well, that was gorgeous. See, I knew that we were going to have a good conversation.
I know. Can I tell people how to reach me?
Of course, you have to tell people how to reach.
Okay. So if anyone is interested, contact me. My website is judithjohnson.com. And I've got lots of blog posts there, for example, about how to deal with issues around end of life. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook. But the real way to get around to where am I and what do I do is through my website.
Yeah, we put everything on the website.
Yeah.
And I'm going to put everything in the description anyways, also. Good. So look at the description. And if you, again, we said it earlier, if you'd like a workshop, please just reach out to either of us. I work with Judith, so we'll set you up and we'll get that running for you. And so that's it. So thank you so much for accepting my invitation. I really wanted you to be here and have this important conversation that people don't usually want, right? Yeah. But I think it's important to have it.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you very much. Everybody, I'm going to say to you, dream it, dare it, do it, and live the life you want, and see you next week. Bye.